Hey, what's up, everyone? It's Jenny Dildine, the LDS Mission Coach, and you are listening to the LDS Mission Podcast, episode number 46, Do I Stay Home or Do I Go Back Out? I'm Jenny, the LDS Mission Coach, and whether you're preparing to serve a mission, currently serving, a returned missionary, or a missionary mama like me, I created this podcast just for you. Are you searching for epic confidence, ready to love yourself and to learn the how of doing hard things? Then let's go. I will help you step powerfully into your potential and never question your purpose again. It's time to embrace yourself, embrace your mission, embrace your life, and embrace what's next. Hey, what is up, everybody? Welcome to the podcast. Thanks for joining me today. I'm actually super excited because by the time this podcast airs, I'm going to be on vacation with my family. I've sort of tried to make it a tradition that when someone comes or goes from their mission, that we take a nice big family trip together. And since my son got home in August, we've done like a little quick getaway over Christmas. But you know, when you have a job and you're going to school and then one of your kids gets married and they have a job and they've got to go to school, and then one of your kids gets engaged and they have a job and they go to school, it becomes quite challenging to try to figure out schedules and when everyone can be together. I'm just so looking forward to hanging out with all of them together. With all of my kids, we're going to be in Disney World. You can check out my story on Instagram at jenny.theldsmissioncoach, or on Facebook. I will be sharing all of the details of what I'm eating and what we're doing. Because when you go to Disney World, you got to eat a Mickey pretzel, right? It's going to be super fun. Today, I also want to make sure that you guys know that I have a free resource available. Last time I kind of talked about my free video series for return missionaries, but I also have a resource for moms or for parents who love their returning missionary and want to know how to best help them in their transition home. So if you go to jennydildine.com/landing page, and there's a dash in between landing and page, and then there's another slash, you will be able to get 5 tips to help your missionary in their transition home. I know when my sons came home from their mission, I was like, I don't know what to do for them. Should we keep them busy? Should they get a job? How should I talk to them? How can I help them process the mission? And in this PDF, it's just a free download just for you, totally free, to give you some help on how to help your missionary. I know that that's something I really wish that I would have had. Now, if you can't remember the URL, no big deal. I'm going to link it in the show notes. 5 tips to help your returning missionary. You can just go there, click on the link, and grab it right now if you want to. I highly recommend that you do. It will give you so much confidence in helping your return missionary. We actually end up making a lot of mistakes as parents with our return missionaries. So I'd love for you to just kind of read through this, get those 5 tips so that you can feel successful and help your return missionary feel successful. Today I'm going to address an email that I got. I get emails periodically from missionaries, from return missionaries who've been following me, from preparing missionaries. I get a lot of emails actually from missionary moms, but I love when I get to hear from you and I get to hear what's going on for you specifically. So I just want to read you a little excerpt from this email, and she basically asked me to kind of address what she's going through right now. So she said, I returned home early from my mission about a month ago. I have had a very difficult 4 months, and now I'm home for a little. And soon I have to choose whether I want to go back out or not. So I've actually worked with quite a few missionaries who've been serving for a short time, and then they go back out. Now, what also happens is I've worked with quite a few missionaries who serve for a short amount of time or they come home earlier than they had expected, and they don't go back out. So this can be like a pretty big decision, and it can be pretty overwhelming to think about. Some of the things this girl mentioned in the email is she doesn't want to do it for the wrong reasons. She doesn't want to do it because she's trying to like people please her parents. She is also somewhat worried about like if she'll be able to be successful once she's back out on the mission. So she just basically asked if I would give some helpful tools and strategies for sort of this question on whether I stay home or I go back out on the mission. This is just going to be like a quick overview of some things I want you to consider and to think about before you make the decision to stay home or to go back out. Now, I need you to know that I have zero agenda about whether to get you back out on a mission or whether you need to stay home. As a coach, when I work with these clients, I have no like ulterior motives to get them to do what I think they should do. What I do as a coach is I empower them to really understand what it is they want, to really empower them to be completely capable, completely believe in themselves. And I firmly believe that when you believe in yourself, when you drop this people pleasing, when you know how to manage your fear and your mindset around all of it about this decision, you will know what to do. Now, I know that can be kind of crazy to sort of figure out, and there's a lot of mind drama there, and there's a lot of emotions there. Many of the missionaries who I've worked with in sort of this area, they quickly came home from the mission. It was like 1 second they were talking to the mission counselor, and then the next second they're on a plane headed home. It's like so fast that they don't even know what happened. So there's a lot to process. There's a lot to sort of like work through and unpack. And then on top of that, now you're supposed to decide whether you want to go back out or not. It makes sense that it feels heavy. It makes sense that you feel confused about what the quote unquote right thing for you to do is. And so I'm hoping here I can give you a little guidance. Please know if you need more guidance, I offer a free strategy call. Like if you're in this position, go ahead and click on the link in my profile on my Instagram page or on my Facebook page, and we can talk about it. We can talk about specifically what's going on for you. We can clear away the confusion, and I can help you get pretty clear just in a session. So there's that I have for you, which I will also link in the show notes so that you can just easily get on a call with me. I would love to chat with you about this because it's kind of a lot, and that's okay. I was sort of hoping that after COVID, where we had so many missionaries coming and going, and so many missionaries like in quarantine, like stuck in their apartments, and some of them not even really having a choice whether they came home, I was sort of hoping that all of us would be able to have more of an understanding around returning home early. And I'm going to get more into like why I don't like to say early. I feel like there still is for return missionaries. There's a lot to unpack, but for missionaries who come home earlier than they expected, there's also some shame there. And that's okay. Like we can work through the shame. We can work through the thoughts. It is just your brain. But just know when we come home early or when we're in this like decision-making process, there's a little bit more to figure out. I hoped it would sort of change because of COVID. I don't really feel like it has. I still feel like we have those expectations. But I want to just, again, give you some stuff to consider before you make this decision to whether you're going to stay home and call your mission complete or whether you go back out. Let me just go over them. I have, how many did I come up with? I have 7 here that I want to talk to you about. And I'm just going to give you a brief overview so you kind of know where we're headed. Number 1, consider getting some help. Number 2, consider that you came home before you expected. Number 3, consider the fuel that is driving your action. Number 4, consider that the brain doesn't like hard things. Consider that your brain will go back with you on your mission. Consider that I made the right decision is a thought you get to have anytime. Number 7, consider that you can't mess up God's plan for you. Okay, so I want to dive a little bit deeper into all of these. And these are all just considerations that I want you to sort of like internalize, maybe journal about before you make this decision to whether to stay home or to go back out and which decision is right for you. The first things first, and I've mentioned this already, is consider getting some help. Now, your parents are amazing, but your parents might have an agenda. They might have strong opinions about whether you go back out on your mission. And that's okay. Like they want what's best for you. They really do. But sometimes it's hard to talk to our parents about this kind of thing. So what I would highly recommend is that you get a counselor or you get a coach. Someone who has an unbiased opinion about what they think is best for you as a missionary. And listen, if you're a parent listening to this, I just highly recommend that you get your missionary some help to process the shame, to process the indecision, to process the sadness, to process there's usually some grief there. What I have found for me is what's easiest for me is if I get to just be the parent. I don't have to be the counselor, the coach to my kids. I just get to be there and love them and not have to fix anything. I just get to hold space for what is happening for them. Like I kind of mentioned before, not only is it a hard transition for return missionaries in general, but usually we have this added layer of judgment around coming home before we thought we were going to. Not because I think that there should be this shame or this judgment, but our brain really does tell us that if we were different, or if we were more spiritual, or if we were more prepared, or if we would have prayed more, then we could have handled the mission. And instead we're home. So that's kind of just a lot to try to make sense of. It is just your brain, totally fine. But that is my number one thing before you make this decision is consider getting some unbiased help. Okay? Number 2, consider that you came home before you expected, not early. The reason I want you to think about it this way and consider that you came home earlier than you were expecting is because if you go back to my podcast, it was a couple podcasts ago, I can't remember which one, it's called Loaded Words, is sometimes we have words in our language, especially surrounding the mission, where there's a whole bunch of extra thoughts that go along with the word early. Meaning, when we think of early, we have a whole bunch of extra thoughts like, I shouldn't be coming home early. It's bad to come home early. I wish I didn't have to come home early. See what I mean? If we were just talking about being early to a party, that's not a loaded word. But when we use it in terms with the mission, it is kind of loaded. And when it's loaded, we have a hard time kind of figuring out like how we even feel about it because there's so many additional sentences that are attached to it. So this is what I want you to consider. Is you came home, all that happened is you thought you were going to serve for a certain amount of time and you didn't. It's not what you expected. You had a thought or a picture of what you thought was going to happen and guess what? You're just wrong about that. Have you ever been wrong about anything before? It's okay though, right? Just you came home earlier than you expected, and it's totally fine. You were wrong. Number 3, consider the fuel that's driving your action. What I teach on this podcast is that the emotion that you're feeling is like fuel in a car. So when you're making this decision, I want you to just kind of play with it in your mind. Like if I went back out on the mission, what would be the emotion driving that? Would it be fear? Would it be obligation? Would it be shame? Would it be guilt? I just want you to kind of notice that those emotions are not fruits of the Spirit. I mean, it's probably kind of obvious, but notice that if we are taking an action of going back out on our mission from fear, obligation, or shame, it's probably not going to work out well. Now, same could be true, like flip it. If you, like, I want you to think in your mind, if I was going to stay home from my mission and not go back out, would I take that action from fear, obligation, shame, regret? I just want you to check yourself. Let's say you can get to a place of courage or commitment. Because listen, whether you go back out or whether you stay home, those emotions are going to be required. Commitment doesn't feel very good. Commitment, I think of as like, I'm doing this no matter what other people say, no matter what I'm going to feel. If you go back out, a lot of people are going to have a lot of opinions and you're going to have to feel committed. If you stay home, people are going to have a lot of opinions and you're going to have to feel that commitment or courage even. Courage also doesn't feel that good because we're kind of butted up against the fear. Like, did you know that courage doesn't really exist unless fear is there too? Kind of interesting to think about, right? So whether you go back out or whether you stay home, just play with that. Could I be driven with the fuel of courage? And remember, those emotions, you guys, are created with your thinking. So of course you can, but I just want you to check yourself. That is kind of like another level. It's like where I'm willing to feel some negative emotion and I'm doing it anyway. But you could also fuel yourself with compassion and acceptance. And I've seen both, you guys. Compassion and acceptance for what is. When you fuel yourself going back out on the mission, you're going to have an amazing experience. When you fuel yourself staying home from the mission and not going back out, when you fuel that with compassion and acceptance, you're going to have an amazing experience. Because your emotion is what drives your action. It's what flavors the experience you're going to have. So before you make a decision, I want you to just think about it a little bit. What would be the emotion driving the action of staying home? What would be the emotion fueling the action of going back out? And am I willing to feel that? Am I even capable of maybe feeling something else? And we know that you are because it's caused by your thoughts. But if we're in fear right now and obligation and shame, is it possible that I could feel courage and commitment? One of the sisters that I worked with, she was home for about 12 weeks and we started in fear and obligation and shame. And by the end, she was full of courage, commitment, compassion, and acceptance. And she went back out. But one of the other sisters who I worked with, she came home and at first she was full of fear, obligation, and shame. And she didn't have the choice to go back out. So she had to fuel herself with courage, commitment, compassion, and acceptance to stay home. So it goes both ways. So just check yourself. What would be the fuel driving your action? Number 4, consider that the brain doesn't like hard things. You can go back to one of my episodes. It's called When the Brain Freaks Out. And I talk about preparing missionaries and how right before they leave, their brain starts to freak out and say, this is a terrible idea, because the brain doesn't like change. It doesn't like to get out of its comfort zone. It wants us to stay the same forever. So it makes 1,000%, is that a thing? 100% or 1,000% sense that if you decide, I'm going to go back on the mission, your brain's going to freak out. It will try to blame your emotions on what happened on the mission. Be like, remember this companion or remember this thing? It will tell you that it'll be too hard. It'll be like, remember how much anxiety we felt? Remember how discouraged we were? Remember how much loneliness we felt? Remember how depressed we were? We don't want to do that again. That's what your brain will do. So I just want you to be on to your brain that your brain won't want that. For obvious reasons. Remember, in one of the podcasts, I talk about how your brain can't differentiate between physical pain and emotional pain. And your brain is going to be like, no, thank you. I don't want that. But here's what you need to know. You created your emotions on the mission, and you would create your emotions again when you go back out. Your thoughts create your emotions. Okay? So just sort of make peace with that. Like, oh, I created those emotions on the mission with how I was thinking. And if I go back out, I get to create something different if I want to. Or if I stay home, guess what? Your brain is probably going to freak out too, because it's not what you were expecting or not what you were planning on. It feels way out of your comfort zone. That's okay. Your brain doesn't like hard things. It might tell you, we can't stay home. That's going to be too hard. What will people think of us? Again, it'll try to blame your emotions on things outside of you. It'll say things like, well, what's the ward going to think? Or what is everyone I date going to think if I only serve for X amount of months or weeks? Here's the last thing you need to know about this, your brain doesn't like hard things, is the worst thing that can happen to any of us is a negative emotion. Listen, you're going to experience negative emotion out on the mission if you go back out, and you're going to experience negative emotion at home because you have a brain. Which takes me to number 5. Consider that your brain will go with you back on the mission, and your brain will be with you if you stay home. It doesn't matter where you are. Even when my family is in Disney World, we're going to experience 50-50. Half the times our brains are going to be like, this is so much fun. I love being together. And half the time our brains are going to be like, this is terrible. Whose idea was it to come to Disney World? Do you see what I mean? The location doesn't matter. So if you go back out on the mission, you're going to have 50% positive emotion and 50% negative emotion. If you stay home, you're going to have 50% positive emotion and 50% negative emotion. So if that's true, and I offer that it is true, who do you want to be? Do you want to feel some sadness, some loneliness, some frustration, some anxiety on the mission? Or do you want to feel some loneliness, some sadness, some frustration at home? Listen, the mission doesn't cause anxiety. Your brain does. Now, not to say like that there's some like chemical things. I'm not taking anything away from like a diagnosed anxiety disorder. Please don't misunderstand me. But a good chunk of the time, at least the clients that I work with on the mission and before the mission, is they feel the emotion of anxiety. It's caused by their thinking. You're going to have that same brain on the mission and when you are not on the mission. I see this all the time in return missionaries as well. So just be on to your brain and be aware that wherever you go, your brain goes with you. Your thoughts cause your emotions, and your thoughts will go with you on the mission. Your thoughts will stay home with you if you decide to stay home. Number 6, consider that I made the right decision for me. That thought is a thought you get to have at any time, no matter what people think. People, like I mentioned a little earlier, are going to have a lot of opinions. I don't want you to get into people pleasing, like I have to go because what would my parents think? Or I have to go because what would my stake president think? Or I have to stay home because of this or something outside of me. People will judge you if you go back out. People will judge you if you stay home. That's just what humans do. We judge each other. Okay? Totally fine. it won't matter that other people are judging you if you don't judge yourself. When you think this thought, I made the right decision for me, how do you feel? Confident. And it's okay if other people don't understand. Someone could come up to you and be like, oh my gosh, why did you decide to stay home? I've even had one person say, you know what's better is if you go on a mission, you can't progress spiritually unless you go on a mission. None of that is true. And once you decide I made the right decision for me, or I'm making the right decision for me, you will believe in yourself and you'll be able to have your own back. You'll be able to have confidence in what you've decided. And like, other people can be wrong. When someone says like, oh, you're never going to progress spiritually again, can be like, oh, I kind of disagree. Okay? So I made the right decision for me is always a thought that's available to you. There's just no upside to believing I made the wrong decision. I don't know why anybody would ever think that, because that feels terrible. Just decide that, of course, you're going to make the right decision for you. Number 7, consider that you can't mess up God's plan. This is one of my favorite ones, because why do we think as humans that we are powerful enough to overcome what God has in store for us? I don't know why we start to think that. But what's true is God has a plan for us, and it's not our job to just like be in this guessing game of what's right and what's wrong. We get to live into that plan. We get to create the plan. We get to be co-creators with God in the plan that He has for us. My question for you is to consider is, do you trust that Heavenly Father will give you the exact experiences you are meant to have to become more like Him? When I prayed when both of my sons were on their missions, I never prayed like, I hope that they have amazing, happy experiences. Because I knew that that wouldn't change them, always having happy experiences all the time. You know what I prayed? I prayed, Heavenly Father, please give my sons the experiences that they need to become the best version of themselves, to become more like you. And man, Heavenly Father gave those experiences to them. Some of you, that is going to be on the mission, that experience that you need. Some of you, it's going to be when you stay home. But whatever you decide, trust that Heavenly Father, He will make sure that you have the experiences that you need to become like Him. You can't mess it up. You really can't. Some people will even like try to say that you have more growth on the mission than anywhere else. And like that might be true in some cases, but in other cases, you know where I've seen the most growth? As someone who comes home before they were expecting. The amount of growth and self-acceptance and self-love that they have to tap into changes them for good. Ironically, in a condensed amount of time and faster, that they have to figure that stuff out. So you can't mess up God's plan. He's going to always give you opportunities to learn what you need to learn. I actually said to one missionary, he was sort of like in shame, like if I would have just learned how to handle my companion better, if I would have just this, and like maybe I wouldn't be home right now. And I said, don't you think that could have happened? Like, isn't that possible for God to make that happen? Or another sister who was like, I just want my leg to heal so I can go back out. And I said, do we trust God enough? Like, He could totally heal your leg if you were supposed to go back out, right? But He must have something different in store for you. And are we willing to surrender to that? Knowing that we can't mess up God's plan. We got to trust Him. Listen, I want to share with you one analogy that I like to think of with this coming home from a mission earlier than we expected. I was working with this client and he had served 7 weeks. And his mom got on a strategy call with me and she's like, oh my gosh, he's just in so much shame. I don't want this to like ruin him. And so we started working together. He went through my Return Missionary program. And what he told me when we got on that first call is he said, I am not going to be able to let go of the shame or the guilt that I feel until like my return date passes. It was something like July of 2023. He said, I'm not going to be able to forgive myself. I'm not going to be able to move on. And I shared with him this analogy. I said, listen, Heavenly Father is going to give you the experiences you need. You're here to be a human and feel all the range of human emotion. It's what makes you more like Jesus Christ and more like God. And everyone else on the mission is growing, but you got a fast pass. Like, what if that's true, you guys? What if the experiences that Heavenly Father is giving you, whether that is like in the furnace of fire on the mission, or if that's in the furnace of fire at home, is your fast pass to growth and transformation? It's your fast pass to become more like Him. Instead of it taking years to learn what you need to learn, you just learn it in a short time where you really struggle on the mission. Or you learn it in a short time when you really struggle when you come home. Like, that is possible. It could just be a fast pass. I wanted to read to you one of the things that he said in our last call because it was just so powerful. What he told me is he said, ever since I got home, it was like a burden that I couldn't let go of. It was a burden whether I was supposed to go back out or not. It was a burden just like questioning myself whether I had come up short. And what he said to me is he's like, after working with you, I just didn't even know that I could feel this good. He said, after working with you for the first time, I feel accomplished. I can look forward into the future without feeling guilty about my mission. He said, I've actually sort of been in shock this last week. I didn't know that I could be okay with myself. I just think of myself and I think of God's plan different. And he said, in a good way. Isn't that amazing? He's been getting messages from other of his friends that are still on the mission. He's been getting emails, stuff like that. And it used to send him down like this shame spiral, this like disappointment spiral in himself. And now he's just like, it doesn't faze me. I believe in myself. He has decided that he made the right decision for him. And again, I've worked with other missionaries who the right decision for them was to go back out. So I hope, though, that these things that I'm wanting you to consider before you make this decision help you. I'm going to go over them one more time. Consider getting some help, either a counselor or a coach that can work through this stuff with you. Number 2, consider that you came home earlier than you expected, not just early. Number 3, consider the fuel that would be driving your action. Is it fear, obligation, shame, or is it courage, commitment, compassion, and acceptance? Number 4, consider that the brain doesn't like hard things. So of course it's going to freak out at the prospect of going back into something hard. But that's okay. The worst thing that can happen to any of us is just feeling a negative emotion. Number 5, consider that your brain will go with you back on the mission. On the mission, it's 50% positive emotion, 50% negative. Not on the mission, same thing. The mission doesn't cause 50-50, your brain does. Being home doesn't cause 50-50, your brain does. And if that's true, where do you want to experience that 50-50? On the mission or at home? Consider, number 6, that I made the right decision for me is a thought you get to have at any time. no matter what other people say or what other people think. Number 7, consider that you can't mess up God's plan for you. You guys, if you really get to create whatever experience you want, if there really is no way to mess up God's plan for you, what do you want to do? Don't be confused. Just do some journaling. Consider all of these options. If you want some help with it, reach out. Okay? Everyone have the most amazing week. Take care. Thanks so much for joining me on the podcast today. Listen, if you are learning a lot from this podcast and you like what you're hearing, you will absolutely love hopping on a free strategy call with me. That's where you and I meet up one-on-one and talk specifically about what is going on for you. I love teaching young adults the mental and emotional tools that they need to overcome worry and anxiety, serve the successful missions they've always dreamed of, and navigate their post-mission experience with confidence. So go to jennydildine.com and click on the Work With Me link. I would love to meet you, and I would love to get you some helpful tools and strategies to help you fully embrace whatever is next for you. And in the meantime, no matter which part of the mission experience you are involved in, just know that Jenny, the LDS Mission Coach, is thinking about you every single day.